Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is Career Girl Romances, issue number 68, dated April 1971. The cover here is telling a story. We see a young flight attendant, although they would have been called stewardess at this time, and she's checking in passengers. And it turns out one of the passengers is an old flame of hers. And we get to see the faces and the thought balloons of each of the characters. It looks like Megan is concerned about seeing this old flame because she had been told by psychiatrists that he was, quote, totally mad. And at the same time, Walt here is determined to win back her love. So this is the kind of the gist of this story, was sort of these at one time lovers who sort of became separated due to the Vietnam War. So this is a rare example and an early example of them mentioning the war. Even though that subject rarely came up in the comics, this was a huge concern to most young comic book readers at the time, because if they were not, say, eligible for the draft, they had, there were sisters who were concerned about their brothers, and some of the older ones may have been concerned about boyfriends and stuff. And we see here that the comic also offers a free pinup poster of Shirley Jones. She was the matriarch of the Partridge Family. Charleston Comics had the licensing for that particular show, so they came out with comic book versions of both the Partridge Family themselves and solo adventures of David Cassidy. Shirley Jones, beautiful woman, one of TV's early MILFs. So the main story, we're told, is a love story that will bring tears to your eyes. Remember Me? However, that's not the first story that we're greeted with. The first story is called Never Waste Your Kisses, and our main characters are Lee and Gardner. And this is an issue where basically a mom turns her daughter into a lottery ticket. And all the dreams that the mom couldn't fulfill because she fell in love with a man who didn't make a sufficient amount of money for her, she's going to foist these insecurities on her daughter. So, the mom is looking at it as, hey, I was a hot chick, and I should have used that hotness to bag a wealthy man. Instead, I married this broke-ass guy that I love, but I don't love the fact that he doesn't have the stuff that I want. So I'm going to devote all my energies to my daughter and train her to not make the mistake I did, and that is falling in love with a broke-ass man. So anyway, we see Lee's at a dance, and she's dancing with a guy called Tommy. Tommy kind of has this blonde hair helmet on. And it turns out there's some type of disagreement between the two. Tommy is basically trying to kiss Lee, and Lee doesn't want this. And, Tommy's using the old thing, oh, come on, baby, you really want it. But it turns out that she likes Tommy, but she doesn't really have deep feelings for Tommy. And it turns out he's not really the type of guy that she would want to marry anyway. And Tommy calls her a gold digger, saying, listen, you just want cash, hard code cash. Lee's offended by this. How dare you call me a gold digger, even though that's exactly what her mom had conditioned her to be. Tommy's angry with Lee. laying it on, saying that basically she's just basically a well-performed robot here. She's not really following her true feelings, and she's just a fake. So Tommy's very angry with Lee. Lee's crying because even though Lee was basically conditioned to be a gold digger, she isn't a gold digger at heart. So in some ways, Lee is sort of fighting her home conditioning, and it was basically by that horrible mom that she has. So anyway, we get a flashback to Lee when she was a child. It turns out the entire family is sacrificing basic wants and needs so they could help Lee basically refine herself and have a better chance of landing a wealthy person, a wealthy man, I should say. The mom is kind of just running ragged over this household. It turns out that Lee actually has a brother named Don. And Don actually had to sacrifice so Lee can have like her finishing school lessons, like piano lessons and dance lessons and tennis lessons, kind of like activities that would say put her in the orbit of, quote, wealthy men. The father is reading the newspaper. He's looking a little downcast. The mom is justifying her behavior by saying, I don't want my daughter to make the same mistake I did, and that's marrying a broke-ass man in front of the broke-ass man. And the broke-ass man is explaining, listen, I can't earn any more money than I do. And, the wife is kind of, somewhat trying to comfort him, saying, I don't blame you for being a broke-ass man. When I married you, I knew you were a broke-ass man. I knew that, honestly, you were going nowhere. And this is why I made the sacrifices, not only for myself, but for my son and you, so my daughter can hit that lottery. And this is basically, she's treating her daughter like a lottery ticket. So it turns out that Lee's a very accomplished young woman. She didn't ask for this stuff. She didn't ask for this type of favoritism. However, it is kind of bothering her. Because on one hand, she is meeting the men that her mom wants her to marry, but at the same time, she actually needs to feel something strongly about them. So it turns out that Lee's is dating a lot of guys who are checking the right boxes, but she just doesn't feel that connection. And however, there's one person here who she does feel a connection with, and that's Gardner Lane. And this is the type of man that her mom would want, because basically he's rich. And Lee herself is feeling a connection with him. However, Gardner is kind of shy about asking Lee out for a date directly. And she's thinking, well, maybe he's not interested, maybe he's gay, but nevertheless, he's not asking me out. And as my mom emphasized, there's an expiration date on me and my hotness. So it turns out that Lee goes to her job. She works at a bank. So for all the money that they had spent, basically kind of training Lee, she takes a kind of a very basic job. But at this time, a lot of professions were sort of closed off to women, maybe not legally, but kind of formally and traditionally. So working as a bank teller was seen as something, quote, acceptable for young women. Lee is still living at home. Her mom is kind of coaching her, saying, "Listen, I saw a rich pigeon at the country club that we can't really afford, but we basically deprive our own son of things so we can be there." Saying, "Listen, he's a good catch. He's definitely the type of lottery ticket I would like you to win." However, Lee doesn't really like this direct interference from the mom. Even though Lee has been conditioned to look for wealthy men, she doesn't really appreciate her mom, like, kind of just directly being involved with her life. However, Lee is open to meeting this young man that her mom had mentioned because Gardner might be there. And because apparently Gardner Lane is a member of the club, so that's why he's excited. That's why Lee is excited to go on this date. Basically mentioning that she has had eyes for Gardner for years, but for whatever reason, he never has pulled the trigger on asking her for anything romantic. So she's kind of hoping that maybe something will happen at this party. So anyway, it turns out that Lee is going to this party. She's with Arthur. That's the name of the rich pigeon that the mom was talking about. Lee knows this guy, and it looks like they're on good terms. So Lee, Gardner, and Arthur, they're at this party, and Gardner's having a nice little conversation with Lee, kind of ignoring the fact that she is with a date. Nevertheless, I think Lee is playing the hard to get role, which actually is appropriate because she is with a date, and the date is standing right next to her. So she blowing off Gardner after that little flirtation, it does make sense. If nothing, just out of simple courtesy. And at the same time, Lee kind of wants to give Arthur a chance. So they're at dinner. It seems like the conversation is pleasant enough. And Arthur is also very rich, just like Gardner. So in terms of the bank account, the mom is going to be happy either way. And however, Lee's a little downcast, even though she's enjoying Arthur's company. And they talk about, I think they come over and they talk about Gardner for a moment. And I think Arthur is sensing that Lee is a very nice girl, and he's really attracted to her. Again, she's kind of this, I guess, kind of like this young Joyce DeWitt. And Joyce was pretty cute when she was doing Three's Company. So Arthur kind of excuses himself from the table, and Lee's taken aback by this because, again, the conversation and the vibe was very positive. And then we see Gardner coming over to the table to talk to Lee. And Lee's very, kind of a little concerned about this because she's like, "Hey, I'm on a date with this other guy." And it turns out that Arthur had spoken to Gardner and basically said, "Listen, I like this girl, but I think she likes you more, and that isn't helping me, but this might help you." And he's saying, "Bro, if you can score with a young Joyce DeWitt, go for it." And Gardner goes for it. And they start talking. I think Gardner fesses up that basically Arthur said to him, "She's not really vibing with me, and I kind of know who she really wants to be with." So actually Arthur was kind of being a good friend. And he actually does, and Arthur does feel bad that Lee doesn't feel that deeply about him. Lee's starting to show some doubts about herself here, saying that basically her mom has trained her to be a gold digger, but she's not a gold digger at heart, and that this is sort of causing these conflicting feelings with her. And Lee's saying, "Listen, I could have gone through the motions with Arthur, probably, spent my life with him, banged out some kids for him, and enjoyed the lifestyle, but I would never feel truly happy." It's sort of like Rose from the Titanic after Jack died. Because remember, after Jack died and Rose got rescued, she married another man. And she was married to that guy for decades and had kids with him.
Oh, there she is. Rose! Rose Mears, your husband! Up here! Who's that? At the top of the stairs, who's that? Jack Dawson. Is he a relative or? The man she lost her virginity to in the back of a car. No. No, funnily enough, she didn't mention him at all.
So I forgot why I had mentioned that, to be totally honest. But anyway, it turns out that Lee's confessing that, listen, love means something to me. And Gardner, again, is talking to Lee, and Gardner is saying that, listen, I've always felt sorry for you. And Lee's saying, listen, I don't want your pity. And he says, no, you don't understand. I know that your mom was conditioning you to be a gold digger because she's not really truly happy with that broke-ass man that she married. And I kind of feel sorry for you. My mom felt sorry for you. And we realized that, you're really a good kid, despite that. So it turns out that Gardner drives Lee home. Lee says that Gardner has been a terrific date. And Lee kind of, this is a strange conclusion. Lee kind of confronts her mom and says, listen, I'm not going to gold dig anymore. I'm not going to, go out there and fulfill your dreams of being rich. I'm going to fall in love with the man I happen to fall in love with. And it just happened to be the guy that was eavesdropping on this conversation. So basically, Gardner had left, Lee for the night, but Lee had forgotten something in the car. He had came back, returning the item, but he had overheard what Lee had told her mom. And this is enough to convince Gardner that, Lee is the woman for him. I don't think he ever explained why he never asked her out on a date before. Anyway, the two kiss. The mom didn't learn anything. In her eyes, Lee married that lottery ticket. And I think this couple's going to make it. The only thing that bothered me was Gardner didn't really explain himself to Lee. I think Lee's like a good-natured person. And Gardner seems like a good guy. He needs to work on the communication. The mom's extremely happy because she's going ding ding ding, and all the stuff her husband couldn't buy for her because he's broke ass. She's gonna get now. They might make it up to the brother Don. Don, I imagine, is probably a head case at this point. He saw that his life was intentionally made harder so his sister can have like all these little luxuries. And that guy's going to grow up to be an incel. But nevertheless, that's the end of the story. Yeah, I think they're going to make it. Okay, we turn the page. We see the pinup of Shirley Jones. It's kind of a nice drawing here. Her nose doesn't have a bridge, though. Shirley Jones is a beautiful woman, and Shirley Jones is a really good actress. I remember seeing her in a movie called Elmer Gantry, and she had won a Best Supporting Oscar, and boy, did she earn it, because she was really good in that role. She was so different than Shirley Partridge in that. But I can't imagine too many teenage girls were like hanging this up on their walls. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next story. This is the story on the cover. It's Remember Me. And our antagonists are Walt and Paula, which is weird because I think her name was Claire on the cover. But nevertheless, the editors, they weren't paying that much attention to what was going on. So anyway, we see a young flight attendant, although they were called stewardess back then. She's checking in passengers. It looks like the passengers are boarding from the tarmac. So they're actually going up that little walkway. The passenger here is Walt. And Walt was romantically involved with Paula. So this is sort of like, these are two lovers that sort of broke up largely due to post-traumatic stress syndrome that occurred in Vietnam. This is a rare comic that had actually mentioned the Vietnam War. Even though the Vietnam War was not a big issue in the comic books, nevertheless, it was a huge issue with comic book fans at the time because they were usually young enough that either they themselves were in risk of being drafted, or they had siblings or even people that they were involved with who had these fears of being drafted. So it was a big deal. It even affected sales of Captain America, because as the Vietnam War became more unpopular, people did not want to associate with the Captain America character, which was seen as kind of an old relic, an old patriotic relic from the World War II era. And that's when you had those great issues where Captain America was disillusioned in the 70s. But we'll go back to our romance comic here. So it turns out they're flying out of Seattle and they're flying to Chicago. I've never been to Chicago. My brother has. He loves it. Basically, from the description he's given, it sounds too much like New York. So I'm like, why bother going? I've been to Seattle. I like Seattle. I don't love it. If I had a choice between Seattle and Portland, I would pick Portland every time. It's smaller, but it's more livable. So anyway, there's a great deal of nervousness between these two characters. Paula is probably more fear than nervousness because she had heard that this guy was on the funny farm, and he even calls it the funny farm himself. So he admits at one time that basically he was institutionalized. So then it turns out that as the flight attendant, Paula here, is checking in the passengers, the captain of the aircraft is there, kind of standing there, kind of making his presence known. Probably, sometimes they greet the passengers as they're going in. I always like seeing the captain when I fly. I want to make sure that guy's not drunk or anything. Paula is being all business here, so she's not reminiscing or even acknowledging Walt as someone who is significant in her life. Walt is saying that he always obeys the rules, so yeah, he's telling her that I'm a good authoritarian now. However, the captain, who's kind of a creepy-looking guy, he notices something with this exchange, and he just simply asks, "A problem?" So he kind of notices the awkward interaction between the two. Paula fesses up, saying that, "Listen, yeah, I kind of have a history with this guy, but it's a personal issue, so he doesn't really want to talk about it." It sounds like she doesn't want to talk about it, but then she immediately talks about it right here. I'm hoping that she's saying this to the captain and not this passenger here who looks like Jack Klugman and could care less about her romantic issues. I also hope she's not thinking out loud. But nevertheless, she's telling the readers that that was Walt and that the two were engaged. And then he was sent to Vietnam. And that's when some horrible things had started to happen for him. And that's when presumably he had changed. And that's the reason why he went to the loony bin, so to speak. That's how we would have described it back then. It was a big story. A lot of Vietnam veterans were coming back with a lot of post-traumatic issues because of basically the horrors that they saw. This was very unusual from, say, World War II or WW2, where issues dealing with the aftermath of war really weren't examined too much. There was one really good movie called The Best Years of Our Lives, and it dealt with three soldiers who came back from World War II, and they all had sort of difficulty adjusting to civilian life.
What are you doing up there? Hey, you! What are you doing in that airplane?
I used to work in one of those.
Reviving old memories, huh?
Yeah, or maybe getting some of them out of my system.
But you never really saw that in the common culture at the time, and everyone that you would normally see coming back from the war always sort of had this happy-go-lucky nature about them, this can-do spirit. And it wasn't really until the 60s in Vietnam where, people were kind of more willing to talk about that stuff. So anyway, it looks like the flight's about to take off. So the captain didn't see any problems here. The two are talking while the plane is in flight. Walt wants to talk to Paula, but Paula doesn't want to talk to Walt. And Walt kind of pulls a creeper move here. He physically grabs Paula by the arm. And he's reminding her that, at one time you said you loved me and that you were planning on spending your life with me, and we were going to build something together. And he's basically saying, listen, I need you now. And Paula's bringing up something that... from Saigon, saying that, listen, that's what you told me back in Saigon. So they're kind of having this airplane conversation, sort of like how Ted and Elaine would have their little conversations in that movie.
Ted, what are you doing here?
Elaine, I've got to talk to you.
You shouldn't have come. I don't have time now.
Oh, stewardess.
Excuse me.
No wonder you're upset. She's lovely. And a darling figure. Supple, pouting breasts.
And it turned out that Paula did try to reach out to Ted after what had happened in Vietnam. Ted says, listen, when I came back, I was crazy. I came back from a combat zone. I thought I was going to die every day I was there. And that drove me nuts, but I still love you. And he was also trying to protect her, knowing that he was such a mess psychologically. he has a flashback to Saigon. It turned out what had happened was that there was a hotel where American dependents of, I guess, servicemen would stay. So, for example, if a wife really, really wanted to see her husband, she could arrange to go, fly into Saigon, and there were hotels that would specifically cater to this. I don't know if that was real or not. It sounds like it would be real. But in one of these hotels, a Viet Cong guerrilla. This is basically the military forces from the northern part of the country. They threw a grenade into this facility, and he's yelling, "Kill American pigs!" And it turns out there's a few soldiers. They're surprised. There's also some American families here, and it turns out that Ted was the one who jumped in front of the grenade. He grabbed it and he threw it back to the initial bomber. The bomber's running away, but at this point, what's his name? Walt. Walt had thrown the grenade in his direction, and the grenade went off, and it killed that particular individual. Which I should say, okay, first of all, what he did was not cool, and that was not right. And I don't necessarily feel bad for him for biting it in this fashion. But at the same time, this individual did not ask for this American involvement. For those of you who might not know the history, after the Second World War, when Vietnam basically ceased to be a colony anymore, I think they were a colony of the French, there was a big independence movement. But the United States sided with the old French regime to retake the colony. And they artificially split the country between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. And I think the idea was to let the North do what they wanted to do, but let the South continue to be a puppet of, basically France. But then the French, they got defeated just through fatigue, and they left. But the Americans just took up the cause, and they basically had this needless war for decades. So anyway, going back to the story, it turns out that Walt suffered a great deal of physical damage because he was still caught in the blast here. And it turns out that some of the fragments pierced his body. It may also have changed his psychology, because he's showing severe, emotional change here, where he's very paranoid. We see a young Paula. She's there to visit him. He's just kind of accusing her of, basically clowning on him. So he's extremely paranoid at this point, and he feels that Paula is one of his enemies. So it was at that point where Paula kind of just left Walt. And apparently Walt, I guess, during the course of over the years, kind of started mentally healing himself. So anyway, Walt and Paula are kind of separated here. And we see that another flight attendant is talking to Paula, and this flight attendant does not like Walt at all. And she's noticing the bad vibes between the two. But she's totally seeing things that no one else is seeing. This is basically Stewardess Becky. You remember the various Beckys, like Becky BBQ and a few other these kind of really strange women who would basically get other people killed. So this is one of them. So Becky is totally paranoid about Walt. Paula's not reading how much of a Karen Becky is being, but she still feels bad for Walt. And we get treated to another flashback. It turns out that, like, prior to Vietnam, Walt was a young officer, and this is where Walt and Paula had fallen in love with each other, and there was talk of marriage and so forth. But he's telling Paula, listen, I'm going to be going to Vietnam in a few days. It's not really that much of a big deal, but we will be separated. So this is when he asks, do you want to be engaged to be married? Paula accepts. Paula is also telling Walt that while you're in Vietnam, I actually found a little side thing for myself. I'm going to be a stewardess, or later on a flight attendant. She's being trained by the airlines, which is correct. The airlines should train you if they want you for that job. And she's just saying it's going to be really good. And Walt is saying basically, listen, when they see you when the male passengers see you in that beautiful outfit, they're just going to fall in love with you. But you need to remind them that I'm around. And so everything looks kind of good there. Now we switch back to the present day. We see the airplane here. It has a huge kitchen. They did mention that this airplane is a 707, and I imagine those would be much smaller and wouldn't have a kitchen this size. But nevertheless, they have to play out this drama. Walt is trying to explain himself to Paula. I think Paula said, "Listen, I had wrote you letters, and I just assumed you stopped reading them." Walt's saying, "I never got the letters, and I've been writing you, and I've been writing to your home, and I think that your mom was probably intercepting those letters and not showing you, because apparently the mom did not like Walt." Also, it turns out that Walt has had some troubles of his own. Apparently, the property that the family owned in the San Fernando Valley, I always thought that was more Los Angeles, but it was confiscated. And then his brother was imprisoned for drug charges, and there were a few other tragedies. So Walt and his family had been having it hard. The two are going at it. Meanwhile, stewardess Becky, she's on the phone with the captain, saying that this guy's armed. She says, "I'm 99.9% sure this guy has a gun in his pocket, and he looks like a fucking nutcase, and we may have a shooting incident here on the plane." So once again, Becky is the woman that will get you killed. So then we go back to Walt and Paula. Their discussions are getting a little more heated. They're going over the letters issue. The captain shows up. Becky is not even guessing that Walt has a gun. She's 100% positive, and she knows where it is, because Walt keeps his hand in his right-hand pocket. And this is where Becky says the gun must be. The captain completely believes this. He tells her to play it cool and to let me take the lead in this. So the captain approaches Walt. And this is some really nicely drawn art here, because there's a lot of good emotion here. The captain is kind of he's talking to Walt like he's an angry dog. And he's saying, don't get nervous, I'm your friend, you can trust me, little boy. That's how he's talking to Walt. Walt is totally pissed off at this. He knows he's being patronized. He doesn't appreciate this guy in his business. and he has this really angry look, like he's gonna belt the captain right in the face.
You clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in. I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No. I am the one who knocks.
Now, no matter how angry you are at the captain, you have to realize that if you're in an airplane, there are basically two people who can bring that down: the captain and the co-pilot. And you don't want to slug one of those guys. You don't want to slug either one of those guys. So this might not play well, but nevertheless, Ted goes for it. He belts the captain. But before he hits the captain is basically saying, "Listen, you gotta relax, and let me know what's in that pocket." And so the captain is kind of reaching out, saying, "Listen, if that's a gun, you gotta give it to me." And Walt is warning him, and that's when Walt belts him. So apparently, what Walt had in his pocket was his right hand. So he pops the captain right in the mouth. Then Paula is explaining to the captain that this is just a big misunderstanding, and she understands. Listen, I know we're giving out bad energy here, but nevertheless, you guys elevated it to an issue it didn't need to be. Walt is holding the captain down, as if the captain is the guy with anger issues and not Walt. But the captain says, nevertheless, I might have jumped to conclusions. And it turns out that Walt did have something in his right-hand pocket, but it turned out that it's a wedding ring. And he's taking this time to say, "Listen, Paula, do you want to get married?" And it turns out that they immediately go to stewardess Becky, and apparently she was quivering, and because she wasn't paying attention, they're saying, "Listen, it's not a gun, everything's fine. You don't have to try to get this guy into more trouble." I don't know whether, Paula didn't say whether she would say yes or no. So she talks about, Walt and his, what went on in the hospital. So she isn't just going to say yes to this impromptu marriage proposal. And, Walt is using language like the psycho ward, the shrinks. And apparently all this happened because Walt was uptight about what happened to his brother. And it turns out that the dad lost the farm, so he had lost that property in San Fernando. And he felt guilty about the fact that he wasn't there to help save this property, because at that time he was being hospitalized, but at the same time there was no way that he could possibly help save that farm in his condition. And Paula's saying, "Listen, I've always loved you, and I've never stopped loving you." And she's talking about what had happened in Saigon. And again, this is more like Ted and Elaine in the airplane. And, Walt is using slang like wigged out. I'm not quite sure I ever heard that before. They said that the hospital, quote, turned me loose. like he was this raging psycho patient that they just said, go out in society. And they said that he was okay. I guess that's enough to show him that, they fixed him. They fixed him. And Paula believes that Walt is over his issues. Then they kiss and they embrace, and it turns out the captain makes an overhead announcement. He tells the passengers that, we'll be landing in Chicago soon, but also we're going to take a little time out to acknowledge that one of the members of the flight crew is getting married, and that they're going to bring out the champagne. They apparently they had some extra champagne. The captain's boss may not be on board with this because they have that champagne to sell, and he's just giving it away. So he might have some explaining to do when they land. But nevertheless, they have the party. It tells us that stewardess Becky now thinks Walt is a very handsome man. That's actually part of the story's narrative. Yeah, in some ways, this comic was ahead of its time. It acknowledged that, yeah, Becky's existed back then. Anyway, we see the passengers are quite happy, probably because they're quite drunk, and they're celebrating the marriage of two people they don't care about. Walt brings up Vietnam again, and then the two embrace. And stewardess Becky has this horrified look on her face. So whatever fantasies that she was working on and that she projected onto Walt, she just found new fantasies to project onto Walt. I'm not sure this couple will make it. I think Walt's being honest here. And Paula's being honest. I think in some ways they might make it, but I think they're going to need a lot of therapy. So this is like they'll make it, but I would put an asterisk on this one. And stewardess Becky here, she'll just have her own issues later on in the future when there's social media. Okay, before I go to the last story, I'll take a look at the Columbia Record Club. I always love looking at these. We see they're highlighting the Carpenters, Chris Christopherson, Barbra Streisand, Donny Osmond, Black Sabbath, the Partridge Family, and 10 years after. Yeah, this is the stuff you would have been listening to in 1971. Probably also be listening to the Jackson 5, Sonny and Cher. Yeah, the Woodstock album, Bobby Sherman. He was another one who would have like pinups. Okay, like I said, you either got hosed or you committed mail fraud. So these things were kind of good or bad. So there's no advice column to this title because it's focusing on young girls who like romance stories, but at the same time, they're also career-minded. And again, things were sort of being more liberated for women, and a lot of the informal barriers to employment was coming down. Although we later learned that, we still had a long way to go. We still do. But one of the career opportunities they're talking about here is physician's assistant. And I remember when I was in college, there were so many students who were looking to get that job. And apparently the position is fairly new. And I got the feeling that if somebody had used the term physician's assistant even like 2 years earlier, no one would have any idea what it is. They're basically saying it does the grunt work that the doctor really doesn't need to do. Because there are a lot of medical procedures that you don't need to be a doctor to do. Although it doesn't mean that, these people should still be doing them. And they're talking about how this is basically a new position, so they have to acclimate people to it. I think there's only one school. There was one accredited school in the country, and that was I think that was Long Island University, the Brooklyn campus, and also at Duke University they were training people to do this. So you're kind of like the doctor, but you're kind of like the lowercase doctor. Hey, those people can still help you. So yeah, she's saying this is a good career if you want to be a career girl. The last story is The Girl Who Didn't Need Love. And our protagonists are Claire and Ted. I think that's the second Ted. Okay. No, there's no other Ted. So we see Claire here, and her date is, I think, Ted. So I think it's Ted and Claire for the entire book. And we see that the two are embracing in a kiss. It's really heated. Some of the other guests are noticing this kind of older guy is kind of gossiping that Claire is the type who wants to be in love, but she'll never allow herself to be in love. So Claire is someone who's focused on her career, and apparently she's a Hollywood starlet, and she's 23 and she's extremely successful. She looks like to be the top actress at the time. Then we see Claire breaking away from Ted. Ted's confused by this because obviously a few moments earlier they were being intimate. Claire is telling Ted that I never want to see you again. This might be signs of bipolar disorder. And Claire is in tears and she's walking off, and she doesn't want to see Ted again. And it turns out that that decision was not based on her real feelings about Ted, but on how it would affect her career. Because apparently, women still, at this time, 1971, most of them had to choose career or marriage. And the idea that a woman could do both was actually kind of an alien concept in many places. So this is sort of the point of view that this comic is taking. We see Claire, who 23 years old, very beautiful, is concerned about wrinkles, and she's using a skin cream. She's not injecting fillers into her face, but she's using this cold cream. Apparently it's very expensive, but it works very well. She's concerned about her figure. We see her doing kind of aerobics, and she's bemoaning the fact that in 7 years she'll be 30, and presumably washed up at that point, because apparently this is basically a Logan's Run here, where in Logan's Run, once you hit 30, you were immediately killed. So it's sort of the same way here. There is a great, terrible movie called The Oscar. And the reason why I'm recommending it is because the reality that's shown here also plays itself out in that film. And basically, it deals with this guy who's on the peripheral of show business. He lands a part in a play, basically being himself. He's so good at it, they make a movie based on this play. His performance, his very first acting performance, gets him a Best Actor nomination. Now, in real life, that's when this guy's career takes off. But in the reality of the Oscar, if he doesn't win that award, then he's back to being a has-been.
You got a nomination.
Losers are a dime a dozen. Who were the nominees last year? Or the year before? Can't remember, right? Only get remembered when you win. And I'm going to win. They need that Oscar, more than anybody.
It's sort of a weird thing. Imagine if during American Idol, when there was Ruben and Clay, and they were both fighting it out for the top spot. And in American Idol, there are no real losers because, you had Jennifer Hudson. She came in 9th, and she's probably the most famous of them. But imagine if Clay, when he lost, he had to go back to being a janitor. That's sort of the reality that Claire is living, and that's also the reality of that movie, The Oscar, if any of that made any sense. So anyway, Claire's bemoaning the fact that she has only 7 useful years on this planet, and we see her at work here, and again, it's Ted, because Ted's a fellow actor. And the love scene that they're working on is doing really good. Oh no, actually, I think she's thinking about Ted. So while she's doing this acting scene, she's really good because she's thinking about Ted. So she's like a method actress. Okay, she's hanging around the pool. Because apparently, shooting a movie, they have really short hours. And it turns out that Claire sees Ted again, and Ted's kind of following her around. She's asking why Ted's always around, and basically Ted is saying, "Listen, I like you, and I get the sense that you like me, but there's something that you're whatever commitment issues that you have." They seem more manufactured than real. So basically, I'm investing a lot in you because I really think that, after a while, your defenses will break down. That's sort of what Ted's saying. By the way, this is a nicely drawn panel here. These faces look so beautiful. Claire doesn't want to hear this, regards Ted as a nag. She jumps into the pool. The two are swimming in the pool, and they have a kiss there. Again, a nice little moment. And again, this is Claire, and this is her basic conflict is career or marriage. Obviously, this is very solvable because she can say, I can have both. But this is not what they're going. The two are still talking. Claire's still surprised that Ted is investing so much in her. Ted is not creeping on her, and he's not stalking her, because clearly Claire wants this attention, but she just sort of breaks it off before it gets too serious. And we see a really nice panel here of Claire just kind of laying down poolside while Ted was talking, saying, "Listen, I feel really deep about you, and I'm not sure that's ever going to change." And this is working on Claire, and Claire lowers her defenses once again, and they embrace, and she admits that when they're physically intimate, she just melts. So they agree to a dinner date, and Claire's going to go through it. She's going to doll herself up to the max. She's still having issues though with the career, but nevertheless, she is going to be a good date for Ted. Ted's all dressed up. Looks like these two are about to go to the prom, but they're clearly in their late 20s. Claire has looks like a live-in maid, and the maid is kind of dressed in this kind of these French outfits that you would see in these movies when they're portrayed as sex kittens. So anyway, we see Claire and Ted. They're talking. They can't wait to go to dinner though. They're thinking about food here. As they're driving in their convertible, Ted mentions something about the hair. And Claire's like, "Don't worry about my hair. I'll just comb it later." So maybe Ted's showing some control issues here about Claire's appearance, and she doesn't consider it a big deal that her hair isn't looking perfect. So anyway, the two are at dinner. It's very romantic. It looks like they're on like a Hawaiian setting. Claire is thinking to herself, if she's falling in love, is she ready to fall in love? because she has that career to think about. Before anything gets too emotional here, Claire kind of excuses herself, and she says she has to think. Ted's understanding. He said, "Listen, you're probably going through a lot of emotions. I'm feeling that. I'm going to allow you the space that you need to kind of, think about what you need to do." Claire is by herself. She's thinking to herself. Again, it's about choosing work or family. And honestly, she can do both. But nevertheless, she doesn't feel that's an option. So she feels this is a sacrifice. And is this man worthy of that sacrifice? She is mentioning that she would be happy being married with him. So it's not like this is a total deal breaker or something, that would cause her lifelong angst. But at the same time, she's also admitting she enjoys her work. So then Claire comes back to Ted. So Claire is in the midst of making this Sophie's choice. It appears that she is going to go with Ted and marry him. The two encounter each other. They embrace. Ted seems pretty certain as to what Claire's answer is going to be, saying that, "Listen, hey babe, I knew you were going to give up everything for me because, I'd give up anything for you." And this is the moment where Claire says, "Okay, you're willing to give up anything to have me? All right, I'll marry you. I'll have kids with you, but I'm still having my career. We're going to hire a nanny, okay? I ain't changing diapers, but I'll still love those kids. And again, you said you'd give up anything, and that's part of anything." So I don't know if Claire has enough on the ball to do that, but nevertheless, the two embrace, and that's the end of the story. I'm not quite sure whether this couple will make it or not. Claire had a tremendous amount of angst making a decision no one was forcing her to make. Ted was not putting any pressure on her to make this type of decision. So this kind of tells me that maybe Claire is going to make up problems and then she's going to foist them on Ted, and Ted's going to have to deal with all these headaches. So, I'm not really sold on whether they'll make it or not. I do want to talk about one ad here. It's apparently it's a service where if you send in a photograph, they will actually blow it up to poster size. So if you're a real egomaniac, you can literally have a poster of yourself. But they're also encouraging people, hey, you don't have to have just a poster of yourself. You can have your pet, your kids, the rest of your family. Now, what I find funny is this picture of this dog. This dog looks like it's being held hostage somewhere. And you look into the eyes, and you see it's absolutely pleading to be rescued or saved from whoever is holding them. And you can also put your own face on a watch too. Okay, so that is my review of Career Girl Romances, issue number 68, and I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.